Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road, producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. This week on American Montage, we talked to Mary Manin Morrissey, a published author, a person who deals with other people's problems at a church, a ministry in the Portland, Oregon area. But boy, did her life start out beset with problems. A perfect, ideal high school student who, in the eyes of others, went astray and then nearly died. Mary, thanks for coming to our studios here in Washington, D.C. Your books talk a lot about religion and faith and ethics. Let me ask you straight away, why does the media shy away from talking about religion? I mean, my listeners know I was raised in Catholic schools in Indiana, and I like talking about religion and ethics, but why do we hear so little of it and see so little of it on radio and television?
Well, I think part of it is that we've lost our focus on what it is that makes life really matter. We've gotten lost in so much of what we're talking about is what's wrong rather than what could be better. We've talked about how to acquire more things versus where we find real peace.
Of course, there's also that criticism that we in the media get about only reporting the bad things, too.
Gets attention.
So maybe it's self-fulfilling in that way. Let's go back to the beginning. In the fly of your book, it talks about how your life started out. Can you take us through that evolution from the time when you were the perfect high school student, and then things went wrong and things went right, and you got to where you are today? It's all yours.
Thank you. I grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, and I had a high school experience like most young girls dream about. I was class vice president on the drill team, the dance squad, and had that coveted title, high school homecoming princess. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of my junior year in high school, I was pregnant. It was in 1966, Beaverton, Oregon. This was a very highly shaming experience. My high school boyfriend and I decided we would get married, and I told a trusted teacher at the end of my junior year what was happening. And the next thing I knew, the principal of the high school called me in and said, Mary, you've done well in high school. We're happy for that. We understand what's happening now in your life, and we want you to know we wish you well, but it would be inappropriate for you to return to this high school next year to complete your high school education because we can't have a pregnant girl being mixed in with the normal girls.
Normal.
I
love that.
And so, but there's a place for people like you. It's across the river in the inner city, not during the day, at night after dark, with the pregnant girls and the delinquent boys, and that's where you could complete your high school education.
So you were told right away at that wonderfully impressionable stage in your life that what you had done was not only wrong, it was abnormal, and you had to go leave the demographic you grew up in.
And potentially contagious.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then go, for example, when I was in high school in Indiana, I remember a case where a married boy could not take phys ed in high school. The rationale was he might give away some secrets in the locker room or something, Society changes. How did that affect you, and what did your parents say? Did you have any recourse to fight back, or did you just play the good soldier and say, well, that's the rule, okay, thank you?
No, that's how we played it. That was the rule, and of course my parents were so shame-filled anyway. I had shamed them, I'd shamed my school. They mourned for me as if I had died. All the dreams that we thought were going to be happening in my life now seemed circumvented. So I went to that high school the next year. In fact, I tell the story that when I registered the first night, and I was frightened. It was a part of the city I'd never been in. One of the guys said, well, my name is Paul, but I'm no apostle. And the other guy said, yeah, my name is Peter, and I'm no saint. And I said, well, my name is Mary, no comment. But it was a very shame-filled year. I spent the year hating myself. My son was born in December. I did graduate. But by the next summer, in July, I was in an intensive care ward in a Portland hospital being told that I had fatal kidney disease. One kidney was totally destroyed, and the toxic condition called nephritis was active in the other kidney with 50% destruction. Fortunately for me, a minister came to visit me, and I remember laying in that bed thinking, how did I get here? I mean, a year ago, my life was heading in one direction, and now here I am being told maybe I'm not going to live. And fortunately for me, a minister came to visit me, and she began to talk to me about miracles not just being something that happened 2,000 years ago, and that miracles are ordinary occurrences that can happen when we touch and connect to a higher power.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, for me, when the minister spoke to me, she spoke to me about a possibility of total healing, and that she said, can you believe that it's possible that in the morning it won't be required that you have a kidney removed?
And you were how old?
I was 18 years old. And when she asked me if I could believe it was possible I wouldn't have to have the kidney removed, I gave her a truthful answer, and the answer was no, I don't believe that. I'm in too much pain. And she said, well, she talked to me about the condition of my mind during the last year and the shame I'd been feeling, how much I'd been hating myself, which is a toxic thought condition. And so she suggested to me that perhaps it would be possible to take all of what was toxic emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and place it in that one kidney that was going to be removed. And could I believe that that could remove the difficulty from me? Could it happen that way? And while I didn't believe it was probable, I thought, well, maybe it's possible. And sometimes that's all it takes.
How did that minister walk into your life? Was she just making the rounds? Did you ask for a friend of the family?
A friend of the family heard about this person, and I asked her to come pray with me. And when she prayed with me, it was more than just saying words. She was really helping me form a new way of thinking about myself and my life. And so she helped me form that thought. And even though I didn't believe it was probable, I thought it was possible, perhaps. She did a prayer. My hair on my arm didn't stand up. I didn't hear bells ring. But I relaxed. And I slept that night for the first night in many weeks. And the next morning when they did the surgery, the one kidney was, in fact, totally destroyed. The other kidney, they came out and they said to my gathered family, they don't know why, when they looked at it, it should have looked a certain way given the tests. Looked pretty good. They didn't know why, but time would tell. And that was 30 years ago.
Time has told.
Time has told.
After all this time. Did you at the time think in terms of wanting instant results? I mean, I sometimes think that in this quick fast food, I don't have time to do anything society, we have gotten away from the acceptance of prayer that our fathers and grandfathers, I'm saying that generically, and grandmothers had, because I think life was slower, and so our deadline for God doing what we wanted was farther down the road. Is it tougher to acclimate people to prayer now that they want instant gratification more than they did before?
I think it's a misunderstanding in an educational process that there are growing seasons to phases of our life, just like there are growing seasons to crops. And that we live in a vending machine society where we do want immediate response. And if we don't get immediate response, rather than trusting that it takes time for an acorn to become an oak tree, and that it is the natural organic process for that to occur, that there's something happening in us that isn't always seen but can be felt. And so the power and the presence of a creator, even in the midst of what looks like waiting, we can still feel the grace. We can still feel the comfort. And the same thing can happen. We can be in the midst of a chaos. That chaos can be all around us, but it doesn't have to be in us.
Mary, let's talk here finally about outreach. A lot of people hear this show, not a ton of people, but a lot of people. You're heard in 100 countries. What do you tell to that lonely person who's out there alone? Particularly maybe a teenage girl who finds herself in the same straits you were in when you were 17, or a person diagnosed with a terminal illness, someone who maybe wants to take their own life. I mean, there are some pretty dire situations out there. What do you tell to that person who's considered an outcast as you were, or who is maybe at wit's end? I mean, how do you tell them things are going to get better?
I say to that child that there is hope. Hope is one of the best things of all. Don't lose hope. You just take one day at a time. Is this the worst day of your life? If the answer is yes, it can only get better. And if you just don't know which way to go, then call your local crisis center and say, I'm going through something, I need some help, and you will get three different options. Pursue the options that you do have, and you will find a path.
Mary, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.